Welcome to the Catch Some Soulshine podcast, and I'm your host, Renee Bova. I'm here to share drastic self-care measures that will help empower you to awaken brilliance after life's darkest moments. I've discovered countless measures that help heal and transform you so that you can live a joyful, empowered life without feeling trapped in the past, without clinging to the opinions of others, and without fear of vulnerability in a community setting. I'm so glad you're here. So grab a cup of coffee because it's time to catch some soulshine. Tonight or today, whenever you're listening, I am joined by my very special guest, Bob Beatty, who is the author of Play All Night, Duane, Allman, and the Journey to Fillmore East. And he also has a blog on Substack called Long Live ABB. So check them out, and I will have both of those linked in the comments or the show notes. Bob is Brian Beatty's brother, and I know that I've talked about Brian on the podcast before. I refer to him as my adopted son. He really helped me through some of my darkest moments, and he was a bright, shining light, a really tender heart, giving, but, he struggled with the disease of addiction, which ultimately he lost his battle. So Bob and I have become friends through tragedy. And, his story, I think, is going to really help you. But one particular day I was, in the blues, and he sent me this song, Soulshine, by the Allman Brothers, and I listened to it, and it just stuck with me. Obviously, it meant a lot to me because I put it in the name of this podcast. So I want you guys to get to know Bob because he is a historian. He has a really great blog that I read, hence my mushroom behind me. And I'm going to let you talk a little bit about, how you got started on this journey of really digging into the Allman Brothers.
Yeah, and there's a lot to this story. I'm a music nut and have been from the get-go. And in fact, it was about 10 years ago I took one of those. I've taken a ton of those personality assessments over my life, and this one's called the Berkman, and it was a really good. It was really good, actually, for a lot of reasons. And, these things can be kind of self-fulfilling prophecies a little bit. But there was a piece that what the guy told me. He said, music is a need for you. It's not like a hobby. I scored so high in like social services and so high in teaching. Like those are my needs. It's essentially what I do. I've been an interpreter of ideas as a teacher in the museum field, as a writer, as a scholar. Spent my career in museums, working in museums, working in and for. And then on my side hustle, my side gig was always doing research and writing. I love music, and I particularly love the Allman Brothers band. You'll have to read the book to sort of get into the detail of all of that. The song Soulshine is actually a new, if you will, song of theirs. It came 25 years after they were founded-ish. That is a whole different series of history that I got to live. Actually, I heard Soulshine live with Brian the first time I saw the Allman Brothers. They played Soulshine, but there's a really long history of this band that kind of surrounds the success of the album At Fillmore East, which came out when I was it was recorded when I was less than a month old, and it came out in July, so I was 5 months old, and then Duane was dead when I was 8 months old. Duane Allman had died right after the album came out. It's one of those rock and roll tales, Don. Live fast, die hard, live fast, play hard, die young. But it was a really great body of music that outlived Duane considerably. The music was blues, which I dearly loved, but it really had a lot of other elements to it of all kinds of Southern music, jazz. There were some country elements, rock and roll. It just had everything. And I mean, this was in the 90s when they hook, they were around my entire life, but it really got me. At the same time, interestingly enough, Brian got into them too, and his friends did. And honestly, this was right about the time Brian started having issues. And I really bonded with him over that and thought, okay, yeah, Brian's, and for everybody's benefit, he's 8 years younger than I am, was very much my shadow when I was growing up. And I went away to college when he was 10. And really by the time he was 13, he was pretty hardcore and he was fighting drugs and alcohol. I just was obsessed with the band. I got on the bus, as you would say, in Grateful Dead or hippie terms. I got on the bus, never got off. Like I said, my side hustle, my side interest is just history in general. And I kind of challenged myself many years ago, wrote a goal down to write a book on the Allman Brothers, get a PhD, write a book on the Allman Brothers, had a whole bunch of goals. When my mother passed away, you and Brian bonded a bit. By the time Brian met you, I think Mom had already passed. My mother passed very suddenly in 2012. She got she was diagnosed with probably a cancer that she knew she had for months, if not a year. I don't think it was like the sudden death it was to us was, I don't think, sudden to her. Brian was in detox when she went in the hospital. Where was I going with this? That was a side note. When your mom dies when you're 40, I'm sure it's the same kind of assessment. I don't know that it is when you lose a child. I can't speak to that, but I can't speak to parents. And look, I know a lot. I had a lot more empathy and sympathy for people who lost their parents when they were teens, and I always did. I'm an empathetic person. I've always felt it. But like, my God, I know the pain I felt and still feel, how compound that by being a child. But I went back to look at my list. I had 3 things I think I hadn't accomplished yet. I hadn't gotten my PhD. I hadn't written a book on the Allman Brothers. And I hadn't learned how to play slide guitar, which was Duane Allman's signature, or one of his. The cover of the book has him playing slide guitar. I went back to graduate school to get my PhD here in town in Murfreesboro at Middle Tennessee State. Got a chance to study under the Tennessee State historian, Van West, who's brilliant and gets all his people graduated. And, it was a great move. And he loved my subject matter because he's a Southerner. He's Tennessee State historian. He's a Southern historian. He's seen the Allman Brothers band and this long legacy that they have. So that was, in all honesty. And then the slide guitar, I'll say, took me a couple years to do that. I've been playing guitar since I was a kid. December of 2014 is when I finally willed myself, spent about 3 weeks working on that. So when the book came out in October of 2022, that sort of completed that whole set of goals. And I was like, oh crap, what's next? But that, I say that somewhat in jest. I have to think about that. But that's really the journey. It was just like when I got my master's degree, it was like, can I do this?
Right. Same here. I got my master's at 45.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know. I just don't know if I can go back to school. I have all these other responsibilities and a job. It was something that I wanted to do. I went back at 45 and I got my master's degree, and I was teaching nursing. I really missed the hands-on working with the people. So then I went back again and got my nurse practitioner certificate. And my husband was about ready to have a stroke when I said, I'm going back again. But I did it. It was a huge accomplishment. And really, it kind of I think it's been a part of my life journey, because I was first in family medicine, and then I transitioned into mental health and recovery. That's what I do now with my degree. And I do see miracles every day. I see a lot of tragedies, but I see miracles every day. And I think one of the things that I've learned is what we focus on enlarges. So I can choose to focus on the tragedies, or I can choose to focus on the successes. And when I focus on those successes, my days are really, really joyful.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I started, and I only did it for a couple days, and only because I think I got the point. The idea of writing down 5 things you're grateful for each day.
Yes.
Were you the one who suggested that, or
yes.
did I hear it from somebody else? Okay,
so I did suggest that.
I knew it came from you. So I did it. I mean, I did it for, you know, and I was very intentional, but the thing that I did, my mistake was no, this isn't a mistake. I adapted the model for my own benefit, right? So the first couple of days is I would kind of accumulate them and sit down at the end of the night and I just put them in my notes on my iPad. Then I started just doing it throughout the day. Like, man, I'm grateful there's a sun up right now. And that, you know, then I didn't have to write it down quite as much. And then I didn't write it down anymore, but that little tiny practice of intentionality with gratitude, it worked. And it goes to what you say. And, you know, the biggest frustration, you can share this way more than me again, because, you know, Brian, my brother, struggled with drugs and alcohol from the time he was about 13 till he died at, okay, thank you. 41. He was going to turn 42 that year. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a 30-year struggle. Probably the first half of that, if not longer, I was angry with him so much and resentful about how much he was hurting my parents, and particularly my mom. My dad was a huge enabler with my brother, and I felt a lot less empathy for him, but it destroyed him. It absolutely destroyed my dad. He never recovered from Brian going off the rails at 13 years old. From a business standpoint, their marriage crumbled. It's hard. Charlie Rich sings a song about behind closed. You just don't know what's going on. You know, I never understood my parents' marriage. I don't think anybody does. But I had to, you know, realize, and I talk to people about this when it comes up, you know, Brian, at a certain point, he didn't want to do it anymore. And he brought up to me at one point, God knows the myriad times he'd gone in and out, and he'd get sober and it was a joy. He was like, man, God, thank God you're back. And then boom, back off. And he talked to me, I remember one time, about the shame he felt. And it was like, I know, you know, and I think with all of this, like you're so helpless as a codependent, as somebody who loves somebody with drug and alcohol addiction, or anything where their life is so unmanageable, right? You're so helpless.
Right.
And the only thing you can do is get out of the way and hope that they'll figure it out. And I think you're, you know, a ministry to a certain extent. I think it's my mission / ministry a bit, is to help people like us
cope.
Yeah, that was the word I was going to say, because it's like, cope. Present company included, by the way. Like your ability to focus your trauma, I guess is the best way to say it, in a let's use the term, in a soulshine manner, right? When you can't find the light that got you through a cloudy day, you know, if the stars ain't shining bright, you feel like you've lost your way.
Yeah.
When the candle lights from home, I mean, come on, home. You know, I'm a historian, okay? Like the concept of home, much less what a home is. Like, what you think about, burn so very far away, let your soul shine, just like my daddy used to say. And I mean, my daddy didn't actually say that like that, but he sure in heck preached it. I mean, lived it. And you know what, Brian, like that's the piece that his death has brought me to realize how many lives he touched in that 5 years he was sober.
So many, across the country.
It makes me, you know, I'm not asking you to assuage my guilt here at all. But I'm guilty. I feel guilty. I worried all that attention was going to go to his head. And I think what ended up happening, at least in my diagnosis, is, you know, when he had his slip. So for everybody's benefit, my mother died. Our mother died in 2012, February 2012. He was sober more or less for a year, fell off the wagon again around Christmas of 2012. 2013, got sober again. I think our dad got diagnosed with ALS. Brian moved in to take care of him. I knew it was going to be a disaster. And sure enough, within a month, Brian stole drugs from dad. And this would have been December of 2013, back in rehab. And while he's in rehab, dad dies. Brian miraculously chose that moment to have that moment of clarity. I always told him, I said, if mom and dad could have, they would have sacrificed their lives to have you not do what you had been going through. he really shined, like you said, like he, you know, he was all in, and I stayed away. I just couldn't, I couldn't let him in. And the killer, and this is, you know, this is for all of your listeners, for you, for everything else, right? The killer is just the second I finally did, you know, okay, so let me say, I started to believe him going into the fall of 2019. I mean, it had been 5 years. He had asked me to go to some of his talks. I had just always dodged. I think he was really upset about that, or heartbroken about that. And he overdosed in December of 2019 and died. I guess overdose means you died. Narcan brought him back. I talked to him in the hospital. I mean, it took me an hour to finally get through it. He's in the ER. I talked to him. I remember being like, dude, get yourself, like, where are you going? And his friends were getting him right to detox, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, he's, you know, and he got back on the, you know, but back on the wagon. And then ended up, you know, long story short, for all y'all's benefit, sold his house, bought a trailer, drove up to Western North Carolina, was going to ostensibly buy, he had all kinds of weird visions. But one of the things he had was a whole pocket full of cash. Yeah. And really, you don't give an addict, he should have known better. He knew better, actually, but he really should have known better. And so he took a fatal dose of, I never got the tox report. They never called me back, but it had to have been fentanyl. Died. This was April of 2020. So right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, the pandemic, I think, really played a part in his demise because, you know, he had gatherings at that house weekly. Tons of people would come there every Thursday for his spaghetti dinner. Right. And they would have meetings and fellowship, and he went out and spoke at different rehabs and, you know, did a lot of service work. And then, you know, COVID hit and that started to dwindle. And then he had talked about, after he relapsed, going to where his new sponsor lived, but he said, there's no meetings there. I don't know what I'm going to do. He had already sold the house, so he really couldn't stay. I think he could have probably had some good support system had he stayed where he was at, but it's just a series of things. And then he goes to North Carolina where he doesn't know anybody, has no support. Sad.
All that stuff that happened with my sister also really, really wore him down.
It did. He talked to me at length about that.
I mean, both of them were, you know, back to back. It's what's really interesting, Don. We lost mom in February 2020, February 12, dad in February 14, Brian in April of 20, and Bethany in April of 2022. So I lost them all in a 10-year and 2-month span. Both my parents in the same month, and my brother and sister in the same month.
Yeah.
And I wasn't close to Bethany at all. I didn't like her very much. We had a terrible relationship, but it certainly don't wish ill or the fallout that has happened with her kids, you know.
Right.
It just breaks my heart. But Brian did, like you said, he did a lot of good, and I recognize that way more in depth. And this is one of those things, like, hey kids, don't be me, don't be, you know.
Well, because I feel like on an energetic level, if you believe in that stuff, he's still around and he's still doing good work, because, you know, you and I have connected. I think the joy that you're spreading out with your project and your blog, which I read, which was so good. That's why I brought the mushroom up right here, because it was about, you know, the mushroom on the album, and you'll have to read it.
Yes.
But I was like, oh my gosh, I have that was my grandma's cookie jar.
That's hilarious. Okay, so for everybody's benefit, I write this. It's Substack. It's basically blogs that pushes out. It's longlivetheabb.com. Basically long live the Allman Brothers band. longlivetheabb.com. I write usually weekly, a couple times. Sometimes it's 5 times a month. I call it conversation from the crossroads of Southern music history and culture, because I'm a historian of Southern music history and culture. I'm also, as a person who works in museums and historic sites, the relevance of history has always been top of mind. Why do we bother to read? You know, why is the past important? And there's a whole bunch of reasons for it. And I've been tearing those things apart and putting widgets in place in museums and stuff for a long time. And so that's what this is. Yesterday, I posted, so the Allman Brothers symbol is a mushroom. It is their symbol. It is their symbol because the Allman Brothers band had a very good relationship with psilocybin, magic mushrooms, in their early days when they were broke and they needed to catch wanted to catch a quick buzz. And also, frankly, it did help them in the early days coalesce as musicians. So that's what they say. Right. You know, I can speak with experience that certain group experiences and chemicals can sometimes make those connections happen more quickly. I'm not saying do drugs or anything like that. And that's it. Because Greg said that's the reason for the mushroom. Greg Allman, the younger brother of Duane. My book is about that era, Duane's era, but Greg lived longest. Greg said, you know, that's the mushroom. It was important to us. But the mushroom doesn't say do psilocybin. It says listen to the blanking Allman Brothers. That's what it says. So yeah, look, my mother was a Florida Gator. My parents were, my family, we were big Florida Gator fans. There was not a, I've got still some of mom's crap over here that are just little alligators, little things she bought, Christmas ornaments, everything else. So the mushroom has become something. You get Bob, you get Daddy. And I've got several of the things like you're talking about back here. So I was posting Christmas ornaments, mushroom Christmas ornaments, on my social media feed at Long Live the ABB, wherever you do social media. My mom's cousin asked, what's with the mushrooms? And I was like, well, that's a post. So yesterday, long story short, all week I've been writing this post. It takes me a couple days to write a post each week because I do bang them out in usually 1 or 2, 3 sittings. I have an idea what I want to do, but you know how creativity works. Is sometimes you don't want to go somewhere, and sometimes you go, whoa, where'd this come from? Prose is my main medium. I play guitar, I do a little art, but prose is my medium. But I also wanted to address the fact, or where do the mushrooms come on Christmas ornaments? Why do we have these red and white Christmas ornaments? Well, just this year, I learned that there have been probably for a decade plus very credible interpretations that some of our Christmas legend regarding Santa Claus actually comes from people from the North Pole, the Sami people of Finland and some folks in Siberia who eat Amanita muscaria mushrooms, the little red and white ones. And I wrote about this and very quickly, their shaman, right? Now we know St. Nicholas as actual St. Nicholas, right? So he was not a magic man, but he was a religious man. Shaman who gathered the mushrooms. They hang them to dry, sometimes in stockings by the fireplace, but also on the branches of these pine trees. By the way, the mushrooms grow under pine trees. They're very pretty up against the snow. They would have an elaborate ceremony to take the mushrooms. That also includes sometimes drinking. Did you get to that part? Reindeer urine?
I did.
I mean, come on. And but basically, they would climb into the yurts of their fellow villagers or whatnot through the roof, delivering magic money. You know, but they did. Yes, they did this. And at some point,
you can't make this up. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. So like, and you're like, okay, you know, and some of them are positing that the reindeer, because reindeer love the Amanita muscaria mushroom, and they filter out all the toxins. And then when they pee, these shaman will collect the pee from the reindeer. And so the reindeer prance around and do funny things. So that's where they think the maybe flying, you know, look, we're talking, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, 100, you know, hundreds of years ago. But that's anyway, that's what. So the next piece to my mushroom thing I'm going to do one of these days is, why did your grandmother, who I'm assuming didn't do psychedelic mushrooms or even Amanita muscaria, why do we have stuff like you have behind you? Like, why was that a big deal in the 70s? And like housewives doing, you're not, it's not like, you know, hippies or, you know, yes, them too, but I've always wondered that. you know?
Yeah.
Now, and they're not psychedelic mushrooms that are on there, but the 70s is when people were pretty open secret, you know, how people
Yeah.
were doing. So anyway, that's
And
the
she had no
mushroom story.
I'm sure she had no idea about that, but
Yeah.
this was her mushroom cookie jar.
D- and you got to wonder, were the designers who came up with that chuckling to themselves about putting one
Oh,
over on the American,
oh,
on the people, right?
yes, yes. Well, think about all the subliminal messages that we have in advertising now.
I dabble in marketing, and by dabbling
Uh-huh.
meaning I have often been in the position in my companies, in my organizations, to have a say or a role in how marketing goes, how you know, look, I'm no expert. I could probably hold my own at a Chamber of Commerce event with, you know, some people who do marketing. Like, I've studied what you're talking about, you know, to enough of
Yeah,
an extent to understand. Yeah, I don't even see through it anymore. Sometimes it's so obvious it just makes you laugh. So
it
anyway,
does. Let's jump into how you believe creativity and to a certain extent, I do believe that Brian's creativity helped keep him in recovery for those extended periods of time because he was very creative. For you, as a person that's had significant loss, can you touch on that? How writing, your music, all of that has helped you through these dark moments in your life?
wow. I mean, what an awesome question. And when I think about my brother, I do think about that a lot. And I always wished for him that he would leave Stewart and go to some place where he could nurture his creativity. I felt and I still do. I suppose everybody feels this way about their hometown that they left and never returned to. But I just felt it was just stultifying. I mean, hell, there's ghosts all over that place for me, and I got
Mhm.
out. So creativity. So I've always dabbled. I've played music since I was 12 years old, played guitar and written songs always for myself, always played with bands for myself. I'm working through that right now because I've basically the other thing that I did when mom died was really threw myself back into guitar. And that's because Brian asked me to play at her funeral with him. He wanted to sing a song. And I hadn't played. I literally practiced that song he sent me. I must have done it 200 times. My fingers, like they weren't bloody, but they were like I had first played. And that got me, like, I was back in. And I've been learning and practicing and doing better. But I don't hear in my right ear. I was born deaf in my right ear. And playing music with other people, it's difficult for me because of the way I hear. And I've never solved it, but I've always played music. That's a side note. I got a book in like 2019 called Creative Quest by Questlove. Started reading it. I was like, wow, I'm creative. And I thought about, like, I am a nonprofit executive. Like, that was my role for years. I run my own company now, I work for myself, but most of it is in that. And I realized that even in my business mindset that I did, the way I approached the business, because I teach a business and museums class, and everybody's like, well, business, museums. Well, wait a second. How do you stay sustainable? How do you stay functional? They call that business. You may not like those terms in nonprofit, but it is what it is. And
Yeah.
the way I approach it always been creative. Questlove opened up for me, at least in the ways that he framed what creativity was and how it works. The idea that not only am I creative in my endeavors, but it inspired me to pursue a little bit of creativity. So right outside this wall is my garage. Literally, I had transformed that whole area. Like, this became, I hate the term man cave. This is my place. This is my space, because this house is, I got two wonderful, wonderful daughters who are now in college. It's estrogen heaven upstairs, and I needed some dude space, but I created with my own limited things. Started buying some supplies, and you know what I've done? I've begun doing a little bit of collage here and there. But back to your question, I'm sorry.
That's
All of
okay.
that's out there all the time. And when I go take breaks and I go walk out, see my dogs, just stand up. This is my space. Upstairs is the family space, and I try not to go up there too much during the day. But if I just need a break, sometimes I just pop over there and just start diddling. And this year it was Christmas ornaments. So that's my thing. That's another part of that post on the Substack. One of the things that I determined to do coming out of the pandemic was, number one, I wanted to be more thoughtful about how I spent my dollars, and I wanted to spend money on creators. I mean, that's literally why I started buying your art. It's so everybody knows I own multiple pieces of Dawn's art. I've given them away as gifts. I've got one sitting here, the beautiful one of the feathers upstairs that my whole family is just like, oh my God. And so that's a moment. Instead of buying some crap, I go to Etsy and buy handmade stuff. And then I started saying, well, wait, I can do some of that too. And so so what I've done, back to mushroom ornaments. It all comes back to the Allman Brothers every single time. I can do this, but I go to the stores after Christmas and I buy their mushroom ornaments that they're selling for $1 because they're just going to throw them away. And I bring them back and I create something with them. Or I'll go to Goodwill and I'll get pieces, and like that's how that one class taught me I can use another piece as my existing another finished piece as my existing canvas to start.
Right.
So that's where, you know, sort of it all comes to. Like this year I've been super busy. I traveled a good bit this fall after a long gap, and man, I came home every time and I just sat down there in the cold ass garage and just diddled, sent a bunch of ornaments out to people as a, hey, I just thinking of you. You know, that's what I've been using it for. And I just noticed it this year. It was like just this year, like how drawn I felt to my little workbench out here at certain times. And sometimes I would sit there for, all of a sudden I'd be like, Jesus, how long have I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I mean, I don't even know how you have time to work, because every time I look at you, you're painting again. So I mean, it's a masterpiece, for crying out. I mean, and I mean all of this. I'm not blowing smoke when I say this. I mean, it's just good stuff.
Yeah, and I paint with my granddaughter too. And you know, I see how it affects her in a positive way.
I've been watching that. I know. I mean, I recognize the multitude of levels that's going on here, and but at its very core, right? It's an older generation passing on wisdom to the younger generation, you know,
right.
And all you want, I know all you want for your children and all you want for your grandchildren is good. You want them to be okay. And teaching and nurturing this skill in your granddaughter while she's in your house, while she's close to you. Anybody who wants to pursue, like, I had no idea how influenced I have been by just simply having picked up the guitar when I did at 12 years old, and being able to literally make a piece of wood with 6 wires on it sing. I don't think about that very often, because all I think about is the wrong notes, how I'm, you know, not hitting, you know, whatnot. But like you said, focusing on the good, I am literally able to sit with a guitar that was my brother's and play on it and make it sound like something else.
Absolutely. I mean, I think their spirit, energy, whatever soul you want to call it, I think is at peace, at rest, happy, joyous, free. You know, we miss their physical presence. Our time here is finite. Am I going to waste it stuck in darkness? Or am I going to look for the light and find what brings me joy? And I just think it's beautiful how you marry the history and the writing with beauty of the music and bring that together. That's a real skill. Not everybody has that. I'm a science-y kind of person. And so part of what I like is how art, music, all of that rewires the brain.
Right.
And there's scientific research out there that's proving it. You know, you're creating these new neural pathways. You're always going to have the pathways, but what we want to give muscles to the good ones, the ones that bring us joy and happiness. And the world needs more art, creativity, all of it.
Yep. And, you know, that within all of this too, Dawn, is, you know, the homogenization of our world and of our culture, right? I mean, gosh, I remember, I think it was Chris Rock, the comedian, talking about this. It must have been 20 years ago. He's like, same, you know, Sunglass Hut, same, you know, Miami subs, same this, like and so like, that's where I think like, I'll go to Kirkland's, right? And I'll buy out their mushroom ornaments and slap Allman Brother crap on them. In fact, what I did this year, I'm so proud of this too. And I created a collage for candy. I bought some stuff at this place called Southeastern Salvage. And so one of the things I had to learn about this art process as an artist, and it really was writing the book. This is funny. When I look at the art that's behind you, your art, I don't see all the brush strokes. I don't see the sketch designs that you did. I don't see the time you started, you stopped, you started, you stopped. I see a finished piece of art and I think, I can't do that. Not realizing that I don't have to finish. It's not a doodle. I don't have to finish a piece of art every time I sit down.
Exactly.
And that was, and it's working too with my writing. Although I've always been okay with the writing, but back to the book. So I had to deconstruct an album at Fillmore East. Okay. It's a 7-song album that was a massive hit for a band that it really had no hits to that point. Duane died right afterwards. So it's got this tragedy element to it and all that. You know, I had to look at the songs didn't just appear as songs on that album, right? Like songs, like a piece of art, like a painting behind you, have parts that people work on and create. And
layers.
What you hear in the studio is different than what you hear live. And there are, you know, so the role of like arrangement, which is something actually I kind of understood, but didn't going into it. So in deconstructing the Allman Brothers, it's hard to imagine now, because it's been 2 years since I turned in the manuscript. Everything became super clear to me about the artistic process. And you know, it helped that I had done that, you know, that I do play and I'm learning. So I'm learning new ways to play, you know, like all of those sorts of things. But it's intimidating for a newbie with 0 skills, right? Like I never practiced my circles, you know. I never did the color wheel until we did it for the thing, you know, like.
Listen, I did a neuro art project. I'm doing a project once a week on the YouTube channel. You got to try it. It is so therapeutic and relaxing. You're going to love it.
My kid brother was just an incredible musician. And all I wanted for him was to succeed in that arena. And, you know, it doesn't jibe well with the staying sober stuff.
In a way, his soul purpose, his soul journey was complete.
I don't disagree with that, actually. I really don't. I said, you know, and you had come down to his service too. Thank you for that. And I said there, Brian had a lot of love to give, and it was just time. I don't idealize our relationship under any circumstance, you know. Why his death was so incredibly hard for me at the time. And it sent me into a legit depression. By the time I got to the fall and really into December of 2020, man, I was not in a good headspace. Looking back on it now, his death hit me the hardest because we had the unresolved issues.
Right.
And you know, the kicker, right? And this is a kicker of anybody who loves somebody with drug and alcohol addiction is there's always the possibility that they're going to relapse and you're going to lose. I had learned and put up a very fierce wall,
right,
for my children and for me. And I regret that. I mean, I legit regret that. And I'm sad about that, but and wish there were a few times I had given him as much as he was giving me. And you know, the irony again is it was just as soon as I let my guard down is when it happened, you know, and you're like, oh man, you know, like,
yeah.
My grandmother, or our grandmother, who lived in the house that he lived in before he moved out, before he sold it, she loved cardinals. And I believe the cardinals are the ones that are loved ones coming back to you. So while Brian was always one of those really connected people, and I was always like, come on, man, you're full of it. I was his brother and I could do that, you know, but it's legit. I mean, I'm very much more open to it now, Dawn, than I ever was before, partially because of him. I do recognize that he did a whole hell of a lot of good in those 5 years. I really, that's Yeah, we
And
went a little longer than I know you like to typically in your show. I hope some folks stuck it out with
that's
us.
okay. Yeah, I hope so too, because a lot of good nuggets here today. Really want you guys to check out his book, Play All Night, Duane Allman and the Journey to Fillmore East, and check out his blog. So,
www.longlivetheabb.com.
yes. And I got to put a plug in for the Ripple experiment too. If you're interested in getting going with the Ripple experiment, you can go to ripple.dawnreneebove.com. All right, good talking to you, Bob, and I will talk to you again soon.
Enjoyed it thoroughly. Thanks.
I just want to take a little imperfect action right now, although I'm not studio ready. I wanted to express my gratitude for having Bob on the podcast this week. You know, his recollection of Brian's life is so much different than mine because I only knew Brian during his 5 years of recovery. Bob had the ups and the downs and has had to forge forward with some healing modalities and processes to take him through the darkness. I really appreciate all the things that he shared with us. The mushroom story was pretty good. I hope you liked it too, and please like and subscribe and leave a comment about this episode. It is one that is near and dear to my heart.